Assalamu alaikum, dear girls of honors third year of Dhaka Mahanagar Mohila College. Welcome to my second online class for you. With you, I am Shabnam Bailey, lecturer in English at Dhaka Mahanagar Mohila College. Dear girls, I hope you are doing great despite this sluggish situation. I wish you a great success that awaits for you. So try very hard to overcome all obstacles in life. With lots of love and care, let's start the class. Today's class is on the satire of Gulliver's Travels. As you know, Gulliver's Travels is considered the most iconic satire of all time. Satire incorporates everywhere in Gulliver's Travels. It is a full-fledged satire in every aspect. In my today's lesson, I will discuss satire from first two parts of Gulliver's Travels. That means from part 1, A Voyage to Lilliput, and from part 2, A Voyage to Brobdingnag. But before proceeding with the satire, let's revise the genre satire. That means, what is a satire? Basically, a satire is a literary art of criticism with humor and irony. It is a kind of literary device to ridicule anything or any person with the help of the device of humor and irony. Naturally, its aim is to attack on the vices and follies of the people or person or the society with a view to correcting them through laughter and mockery. So, from the definition, we find the characteristics of satires. First of all, satire must have high criticism to mock with humor and irony. That means without humor and irony, there will be no satire. The second characteristic of satire is use of follies and vices. That means the person or the society to whom the writer is making satire must have follies and vices presented in that piece of writing. Certainly, its aim is to correction. That means to correct the society or the person without telling them directly. And of course, with this process of satiring symbolism or symbols or allegory, these devices of literary genre are used. There are two kinds of satire, formal satire and informal satire. Formal satire is sometimes called direct satire and informal satire is called indirect satire. In a formal satire, the author or a person created by the writer speaks in the first person directly to the writer or to a character who responds and leads the speaker. In indirect satire, the satirist creates a story peopled with characters who speak and act in such a manner that they themselves are the targets of satire. The informal satire can also be divided to Horatian satire and Juvenile satire. They are named after Horace and Juvenal. Horatian satire is gentle, amused, mildly corrective, but Juvenal satire, in contrast to Horatian satire, is harsh, bitter, full of moral indignations and contempt. Dryden's Absalom, Achitophel, Gulliver's Travels are the examples of satire. Jonathan Swift is one of the greatest satirists of English literature. He had a sort of political background in his early career. His Gulliver's Travels satirically relates bodily functions and physical attributes to social issues during the England's powerful rule of Europe. He worked as the chief publicity agent and advisor to the Tory Minister of Hurley and St. John from 1710 to 1713. He therefore saw at close quarters the workings of the courtiers and the politicians, and he was filled with disgust. Throughout the story of Gulliver's Travels, Swift uses his tone of mockery to explain different topics during his time of European rule, and all of these we find in Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's first adventure takes place in Lilliput. Gulliver swims to a foreign shore after his boat capsized due to a firestorm. Washed upon the shore, Gulliver finds himself tied to the grass, surrounded by little-bodied people called the Lilliputians. The Lilliputians stood no more than 6 inches high. During this time, Swift recognized that England was also a kind of 6-inch being that had great influence in Europe. Swift wrote Gulliver's Travels during a time when Europe was the world's most dominant and influential force. England, despite its small size, had the potential to defeat any nation that might try to conquer them. Swift relates this phenomena to the small stature of the Lilliputians. They stood a mere 6 inches high but had the power to seize the mammoth person like Gulliver. This capability of a nation consisting of miniature people who are able to capture someone 10 times their size can be seen as reinforcing the capability of a small nation such as England becoming and remaining a great power. Even though the Lilliputians are piteously small in Gulliver's eyes, they do not see themselves the same way. To themselves, the Lilliputians feel that they are normal, and Gulliver remains the outlandish giant. The unexpected infringement of giant Gulliver into the Lilliputians' well-developed society reminds the European society that size and strength are always relative, and there is no way for Europe to certain that a Gulliver-like giant might not arrive and conquer them at any moment. This encounter between the Gulliver and the Lilliputians would put Europe's confidence in its power in jeopardy. Swift made sure that this message got across to humble the society of England through his satire of Gulliver's Travels. In the first book, Swift narrates Gulliver's voyage to Lilliput, which allegorically refers to the ascendance of George I to the English throne. Here, the Lilliputians' capital, Mildando, stands for London, and most of the political names that Swift mentions are associated directly with the real ones of the English court. In this respect, Gulliver's imprisonment in a large and empty building, which denotes the political isolation of King Charles I, and the building represents the Westminster Hall. In Chapter 1, Book 1, we see that the building was polluted by an unnatural murder that refers to the execution of the King Charles I in 1649. Part 1 of Gulliver's Travels is largely a satire on English politics, English politicians, English monarch, and theological disputes which prevail in England in Swift's time. In the land of Lilliputians, we find all the intrigues and treachery of the courts of England. Lilliput is England on a miniature scale, and Blefuscu is France. In Part 1, we find Swift satirizing the manner in which political offices were distributed among the candidates by the English king in Swift's time. Crimnap, the treasurer, represents Sir Robert Walpole, who was the Prime Minister of England from 1715 to 1716, and then again from 1721 to 1742. Dancing on a tightrope symbolizes Walpole's skill in parliamentary tactics and political intrigues. Similarly, Reldresal represents Lord Carteret, who was appointed by Walpole to the office of Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. Skydash Bolgolan, Gulliver's malicious enemy, represents the Earl of Nottingham, who had likewise become antagonist with Swift. Again, the phrase "one of the king's cushions" refers to one of king's mistress, the Duchess of Kendal, who is the mistress of King George, who helped to restore Walpole to favor after his fall in 1717. Gulliver's Flight to Blefuscu refers to the Bolingbroke flight to France in 1715. In part 1, Gulliver also satirized another aspect of political situation of England. Once the palace of the Queen of Lilliputians caught fire and Gulliver had to extinguish it by urinating over it. Though Gulliver saved the Queen, she became angry with him instead of being satisfied or grateful. Actually, this incident reminds Swift's publication of his A Tale of a Tub. In this book, Swift satirized the Catholics and the dissenters, that is, he wrote in favor of the Queen Anna. But she misunderstood him and deprived him of the post of the bishop. In the first book, Swift satirized the political parties in England. Among the tiny people of Lilliput, there are two parties distinguished by high hills and low hills. The high hills represents the political party Tory, whereas the low hills represents the political party Whigs. There were also differences regarding at the end at which they broke the boiled eggs between the big Indians and the little Indians. Here the big Indians represents the Roman Catholics and the little Indians represents the Protestants. We are told that the emperor favored the low hills and the little Indians, and thousands of the high hills and the big Indians had taken refuge in Blefuscu. This is a satire on the Jacobites, Tories, and Roman Catholics who had sought refuge in France. Thus, in Gulliver's Travels, Swift attempts to portray the Catholic political atmosphere of England during the years of 1708 to 1715. When the Whigs and the Tories struggled for power. From the English political history, we come to know that when the Tory government fell in 1740, they were attacked by the Whigs for political blunders and were accused of making intrigues with the Stuarts. In Gulliver's Travels, Swift narrates those historical events using the mask of different names and characters. In part 2, A Voyage to Brobdingnag, Swift's satire becomes a little more pungent and bitter. The satire here becomes somewhat corrosive and takes on the character of invectiveness. When Gulliver gives to the king of Brobdingnag an account of the political institutions of England, the king observes that the history of Gulliver's country is only a heap of conspiracies, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, and banishments. According to the king, all these are the result of the avarice, hypocrisy, perfidy, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, lust, malice, and ambition of the people of Gulliver's country. The king's final judgment on the political judicial system of England is that, he said, "You have clearly proved that ignorance, idleness, and vice are the proper ingredients for qualifying a legislator, that laws are best explained, interpreted, and applied by those whose interests and abilities lie in perverting, confounding, and eluding them." The king goes on in this vein and then pronounces his final judgment on human nature. That is, "I cannot but conclude the bulk of your nation to be the most pernicious race of little vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth." Here, to conclude, we may say that Swift exposes the pride and cruelty and the corrupt and unscrupulous nature of politicians in his book of Gulliver's Travels. In these books, he has diagnosed the politics of England, of the then society, and presented it in every form and manner to us through his satirical work of Gulliver's Travels. With this, I am finishing my lecture today, and you will get more about the satire on the third and fourth part, where we see more satire on anything, satire on everything. satire on science and satire on mankind. But from today, I end my lesson here. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and wash your hands frequently. Thank you.